Welcome to Upon Further Review, your bi-monthly snapshot and discussion of sports in the age of COVID. I'm Ty Henry.
And I'm Matt Zemek.
Matt, we got several topics to cover this week. We have some guests, but first of all, we want to talk about some of the breaking news. And you cover the USC Trojans, the Pac-12 in general, but the USC Trojans specifically. And just kind of give us a snapshot of the sports program, the football program, the basketball program, and some interesting logistical issues with the Colorado football team.
Okay, the basketball team, the USC basketball team, is not going to play until December 31st at the earliest. Several games have been wiped off the board due to multiple positive tests within the basketball program. The Pac-12 basketball schedule moved into December, early December, I should say, pre-Christmas this year, because the league went from an 18-game schedule to a 20-game conference schedule to get more games in and to reduce the burden on having to schedule extra non-conference games in a pandemic. So those non-conference games for basketball, they're going to be rescheduled at a later point in time, but the basketball program is on pause, and it's going to stay on pause for the next 2 weeks. Now, as for the football program, the whole USC Colorado complication in the Pac-12 arose from COVID issues at USC, and there was question about whether USC would play Washington State a week and a half ago. USC was able to play that game, and currently the Trojans are fine in terms of COVID-19 issues. Now, regarding this Friday's Pac-12 championship game against Oregon, there is the plot complication of Oregon having to travel down to Los Angeles for the game. If there is a COVID issue with Oregon, there is no clear-cut Pac-12 plan in terms of which team should replace Oregon, since Washington was originally supposed to play in this game, and Oregon is the replacement for Washington. So who replaces Oregon if there is a late-stage COVID issue? That is not fully known. As for the USC side, if the Trojans have a late-stage COVID problem, the plan is for Colorado, being in the South Division along with USC in the Pac-12, to replace the Trojans and play Oregon. But there is a situation that developed Wednesday afternoon. It's typical Pac-12. The Colorado football program's equipment truck, which has to move to Los Angeles for the game. It's the people who were involved in moving that equipment to LA said that they have not received any clear direction from the conference. So the truck was in St. George, Utah, en route to Los Angeles, but there was no really specific plan in terms of whether it should continue to go to LA just to be on standby, not to play a guaranteed game, because USC is supposed to play that game. People are not aware at Colorado of what to do, assuming the Oregon-USC game goes forward. That equipment truck could go to Los Angeles just to sit there for no real reason, and Colorado does not currently have a team it knows it is going to play this weekend, all while other Pac-12 teams, not just Oregon and USC, but the other teams that are playing games this weekend will be able to have, that television money coming in. So it's a real debacle involving Colorado being stranded, literally, not just figuratively, by the Pac-12.
Let me jump in there, right, Matt, and ask you a question about the new lockdown orders that have been issued from the governor's office in California. Is there symmetry between Oregon and the state of California in terms of if Oregon has to turn around and come back, are they going to be staying in California for quarantine? Is this going to be complicated by the new orders? Have you heard anything to that effect?
I don't have precise details on the Oregon-California relationship. The complication which created this Oregon-USC scenario, meaning that Washington was not able to play and Oregon had to replace Washington, that came from the fact that King County, Seattle, has a 14-day quarantine policy. The Washington COVID issues were discovered either very late on the 8th and they were reported on Wednesday the 9th. So with a 14-day quarantine policy still in effect for King County, and that has not been changed, more precisely, it has not been downscaled to 10 or 7 days. Because that 14-day quarantine policy in King County remained in place, there was no way for Washington not just to play USC on Friday the 18th, but even if the Pac-12 wanted to move that game to, say, Saturday the 19th or even Sunday the 20th, no, the 14-day quarantine would have continued to keep Washington in Seattle. The only way the Pac-12 could have played the conference championship game would have been to move it back to Saturday, December 26th. I mean, they could have done it for Christmas. Good luck with that. But if they had played on Saturday, the 26th, and had Washington play USC then, that would have taken the Pac-12 championship game out of that 14-day window. The Huskies conceivably, hypothetically, would have been able to play, but not on this upcoming weekend.
Moving to the basketball situation and saga at the USC and in the Pac-12 in general, we've obviously had a young man from Florida, Keyonta Johnson, fall down and collapse and be put into a medically induced coma. Now, there's a lot of incomplete information. We don't know if he has myocarditis. We don't know his medical condition at all. Obviously, privacy laws complicate that. But we do know that, according to family members, he did have COVID in the summer. Has there been discussion to be a little bit more cautious and kind of pump the brakes a little bit more in light of what recently happened? Have you heard any discussion in the Pac-12 on that?
No, I have not. Here's the real thing with that Keonta Johnson issue. There just needs to be a lot of research done quickly, with all due speed, not sloppy or hasty, but just this is a very urgent priority in college sports to make sure we know exactly why Keonta Johnson collapsed, and that if COVID-related complications are in any way related to his collapse, and he was in very, very critical condition over the weekend. He was put into a medically induced coma. That's very serious. If there are any COVID complications, that is the event which should put the brakes on the college basketball season until we know a lot more information. So that has to be nailed down sooner rather than later, and the information needs to be made public, needs to be a very transparent process in terms of releasing that information so that coaches, administrators, and of course, the players and medical staff all know exactly what we are dealing with. If there is any connection, that is very serious, and the college basketball season would probably need to be paused for at least a few weeks, if not more.
Has there been thought to using Las Vegas in sort of the conference tournament model for a bubble of some sort?
Oh, it's okay. Now that has definitely been discussed in the Pac-12. Bubble plans in general have been discussed. I saw UCLA head coach Mick Cronin commenting on the other day about the feasibility of a bubble plan. It's being discussed in terms of the traction it's gaining. That's the much less certain point. It's worth noting that we still are 2 weeks away from the heart of the Pac-12 conference season. We're having some scattered individual conference games being played before Christmas. After Christmas, we get into the normal Pac-12 rotation where pairs of schools visit each other.
Yes.
The mountain schools visiting the LA schools. That's going to be the first weekend after Christmas. So for those 4-team swings in part of the normal Pac-12 schedule, that is where one would think the bubble plan would naturally come into effect. I mean, there would be some compatibility there, but in terms of the movement or traction, in terms of that plan becoming reality, no strong indications as of yet.